Baruchim Abayim. Welcome everyone here in Yerushalayim Yer HaKodesh and people watching all over the world. Hopefully everyone had a great Purim. Everyone's seeing straight at this point, walking straight. I see some people are questioning if that's true yet. But welcome everyone. A few important announcements, and we'll make them at the end of the Shira also. First of all, this class tonight is being dedicated to two people, to an Aliyat Neshama, Lui Nishmat, Esther Bat Yosef. She should have a Aliyat Neshama, and Alta Necha Bat Chaim Neta should also have a Aliyat Neshama. Thank you very much for dedicating. And people should know that if they want to dedicate a shiur, just let us know beforehand and we'd be happy to do it. The book of the month, Sodot Mina Seder. This just came out, I believe it was last year, so a lot of people do not have this book. It is incredible. It is absolutely an incredible preparation for the Seder. And the Rav really goes through Pshat, Remez, Drush, and Sod. It's not just Sodot, but it covers every level, and it is incredibly helpful for the Seder. So it's for those people who are here, it's available in the back for 60 shekel. And for people who are watching around the world, there's still enough time to order it online and get the special discount and have it get to you by Pesach. Highly, highly recommended. Another important announcement. When will the next class be? Because the first Sunday of April comes out during Chol HaMoed of Pesach. So it has been decided that we are not going to have a shiur then, but it will be the next Sunday, which is immediately following Pesach, which is the 8th of April, Sunday, the 8th of April, the Sunday after Pesach. In the Hebrew calendar, it's the 23rd of Nisan or to the 24th day. So everyone, please mark your calendar. Baruch Hashem, the Rav has just arrived. Okay, I was in the middle of explaining that the next class, again, is the Sunday after Pesach, which is really the second Sunday of April. And then in May, we're going to return to the regular Seder, first Sunday of the Gregorian calendar. Okay, so we're ready for the shiur.
Hope so. So good afternoon here and morning in America. We're just coming out of Purim, the holiday of Purim. So today we'll devote ourselves to continue thinking about Mordechai and Esther and the other figures that appear in Megillat Esther. The Arizal says a very amazing thing about Esther, Queen Esther, that when she had to go and be together with Achashverosh, the king, a goy, so how could she possibly do that as a good Jewish girl? So it says, actually, it's based upon the Zohar, just the Arizal explains it in depth. What happened is that she had tremendous spiritual power, the power to split herself into two, to take her nefesh habamit, her animal soul, her yetzer hara, and to embody it alone, to disassociate her good side from her not so good side. And after disassociating the two sides of her personality, to include the other side of the personality, the dark side, as we call it. The good side is the light side, and the not so good side is the dark side. And to be able to include the dark side of the personality into her own body, to appear exactly the same way. And that's the Esther that she sent to, or the good Esther sent this Esther to be together with King Achashverosh. Together, King Achashverosh and this Esther too, we'll call her, had a son together. The son is Daryavish, the king that reigned after Achashverosh. And in his time, as it says in the prophet Haggai, in the second year of his regime, the Beit HaMikdash, the second temple, was rebuilt. Meaning that he had the zchut to permit the construction of the second temple. The original permission had been years before by the king Koresh, but it didn't actually come to be. And the coming to be of the construction of the second temple was once more in the beginning of the reign of Daryavish, who, according to Chazal, is the son of Esther from Achashverosh. But he's the son not of the complete Esther, as every person has a Yetzer Tov and a Yetzer Hara. And we know that to be a Jew, the definition of a Jew is that he has a Jewish mother. So the mother also has the two sides. Everyone has two sides to the personality. But if you're the son or the daughter of a Jewish mother with her good and bad side, you're a Jew 100%. But if you're the son just of the bad side by itself, which is enclosed in a body, so on the one hand you are the son of Esther, but that does not yet entitle you to be a full-fledged Jewish soul. So it says, according to the Arizal, that he wasn't really Jewish, but nonetheless, within himself, being the son of Esther, even though it's her bad side or her dark side, but it's still the dark side. To be the dark side of a righteous woman is also something very, very good. Her dark side is also good. Relative. Everything is relative. So, since he was the son of the dark side of Queen Esther, that's why he had this great merit and permitted and it allowed the temple to be built. And gave the command actually for the temple to be rebuilt. So he had the source of the temple because he was the son of Queen Esther. So actually what we just have described is several stages of disassociation. And that's going to be the topic that we're going to discuss this evening. In modern psychology, there's a a psychological disorder which is called DID. This is the most updated connotation of this disorder. It's called dissociative identity disorder, DID. It used to be called multiple personality disorder, MPD. But that the psychologists have now changed the terminology. And the word dissociation is the proper word because it means that within the personality, a person dissociates from one personality and then becomes a second distinct personality. Right, so this is very, very important and relevant to the topic that we discussed also last month. If whoever was here last month, you'll remember that we talked about King Solomon, Shlomo HaMelech. And we said that he also had two sides to his personality. And that the bad side actually was Ashmedai, was the king of the demons, who took over his regime at a certain point of his life. And the sages even questioned whether the good Shlomo returned to the throne or not. One opinion says yes, and one opinion says no. In any event, according to Chazal, is pictured as those two different entities. One is King Solomon, and the other is the king of the demons who appears to be King Solomon and takes over the throne because of the sins, actually, of King Solomon. But as we explained last time, based upon many sources, we can understand it definitely in modern psychological context as being actually two sides of the same person. And two extreme sides. On the one hand is this great King Solomon who builds the temple. On the other side is the Ashmedai, the king of the demons. The word Ashmedai has within it the root of the word that appears, a root that appears in the Tanakh in the Bible for demon, which is Shin Dalet, shed. It's part of the word Ashmedai, but also very amazingly, that same root of Shin Dalet, if you just add a Yud to it, it becomes one of the names of Kodesh Baruch. It's the name that is usually translated as the Almighty. Shin Dalet Yud. It's also the name that expresses the thought, as the sages say, the Sha'amar L'Olamodai, that he said to his world enough. Means that it sets limits to reality. It also sets limits to personality change. It limits you. Limit is a good thing, because if you have no bounds and no limits, you just can go way off. So that power, that divine power that puts you in a proper, gives you your proper borders, defines your personality. That is the name Shin Dalet Yud, which actually is just once more just adding a Yud to the two letters Shin Dalet, which by itself means a demon. Now, if we already said this, we'll speak about a little bit about etymology. This is one of the classic examples that the etymological experts who delve into the relation between English and English and related languages and Hebrew, or Semitic languages, say that the word shade, which means demon, is exactly the word shade in English, because it's a shadow figure, a shady character. So everybody has his shady side to him, his shadow appearance, together with his light, illuminated appearance. there's also something very feminine about demons, because it also means press, the very same word in Hebrew. Actually, if we analyze the word Ashmedai, the king of the demons, so if we'll write it in Hebrew, we have to see it in Hebrew in order to understand what one else say. Ashmedai in Hebrew is Aleph. Aleph, Shin, Daled. Aleph, Shin, Mem, Aleph, Shin, Mem, Daled, Aleph, Yud. Let's see it in Hebrew. Right. 6 letters it has. Let's contemplate the 2-letter skips. So the first letter skip is Aleph, Mem, Aleph, which spells the word Ima, mother. And the second letter skip is Shin, Daled, Yud, which is Hashem's name, Shakai. But also it can be read breast of. So the whole expression can be read mother's breast. Shtei Ima. What does that imply? It's one of the things that we're going to try to understand this evening. Once more, our topic this evening is the original term, even before multiple personality disorder, was simply to call it split personality. When any phenomenon becomes extreme or exaggerated, then it becomes a problem. Then a person is diagnosed as sick, chas v'shalom. But as we're explaining, every human being has the potential of split personality, because as it's explained in the Tanya, every person has two souls, the nefesh elokit and nefesh paramit, the divine soul and animal soul. So you already have a split personality. And the 2 personalities are actually in battle, one against the other. As explained, this is the whole Sefer Tanya, the whole basis of Hasidic philosophy. Let's see another beautiful gematria. The term in Hebrew for split personality, which is a root of word that appears, the word for split is a root from the Bible. It's called pitzul ishiyut. So we'll learn a Hebrew phrase, an important Hebrew phrase today. Just the word pitzul, if it's written according to grammar properly, so that you can take out the yud from the word pitzul. Right? There are many hints or allusions in this phrase, pitzul ishiyut, which means a split personality. In the word pitzul itself, the 2 last letters of the root, pei tzaddik lamed or tzel, which means a shadow. The whole phrase, pitzul ishiyut, equals 933, which, if divided by 3 is 3 times 311, a prime number doesn't divide anymore. And 311 is Ish, man. I would think that split personality just means that there are two little men playing around inside me. But this gematria appears to allude that split personality implies there are actually three little men inside me. Why so? This is one of the phenomena that we'll discuss more in the continuation, that just the Nefesh Abahamit, the animal soul itself, as explained at the end of the first chapter of Sefer Tanya, is called Sod Etz Hadat Tov V'Ra, is the secret of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So being that it's the secret of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, it in itself is a dual personality. That's why we said before that even when Queen Esther sends her Shida, her demon self, that's the term. We didn't say the term before. That dark Esther, which appears to be Esther 100%, as King Achashverosh cannot distinguish between the real Esther and the demon Esther, but it's called Shida Shel Esther. So we said that her son from King Achashverosh is half good, even though he's not defined as a Jew, but he's half good. Why is he half good? Because her demon itself is the demon of Klipat Noga, is the term in Kabbalah. It's called the translucent shell or husk that has in itself good and evil. Meaning that just in the lower, we'll say that now the two personalities that we're defining according to Tanya and all the other classic texts of Kabbalah and Chassidut, is a lower personality and a higher personality. But that lower personality itself also has two sides to it. So altogether, there are three men. Because just your lower man also is two men. But you have a higher man who is unified. It's considered to be one. That's the meaning, the interpretation of the gematria that Pitzul Yeshut, split personality, actually equals 3 times man, 3 little men. What does split personality begin from, and why is it something that, even though it appears in men and women alike, but there is definitely something feminine about split personality? Because it all begins from the primordial sin in the Garden of Eden, and from the players that took part in that sin. There are 3 players. They are Adam and Eve and the primordial snake, the Nachash. So it says that each of those 3 participants in the story split into 2. And the manifestation of that split is Purim. Just that we understand even better why this is so related to Purim, to the holiday of Purim. This is one of the reasons that there is a custom in Israel to put on masks and to dress up as some other person altogether. So you're pretending to be some other person altogether. What you're actually doing when you're putting on a mask on Purim is that you're trying in a context, in a holy context of performing a custom of Israel, show that you have this other personality, that you have we'll call it your dark side. We hope that all year long you're the light side. Even though each of those three original personalities, which are the Adam and Eve and the snake, all of them split. But it all has primarily to do with the split of Eve. She's in between, and her split is the more all-inclusive split. Who does Adam split into? What's more, the manifestation of the splitting of the primordial personalities of the Torah is what happens on Purim. That the original Adam splits into his good and bad side, his light and dark side. That his light side is Mordechai HaYehudi, and his dark side is King Achashverosh, which actually are two rivals for Esther. As Mordechai on the one hand was Esther's uncle, on the other hand it also says that Mordechai was Esther's husband. At a certain point he married her. So for Esther it was a tremendous, total, absolute trauma of who is she married to. With many ramifications that Chazal talk about in different medrashim, based upon the verse that when she for the first time had to go to Achashverosh willfully, she said, Kasher avadati, that up until now when I was taken as coerced to go to Achashverosh, I was not forbidden to you, Mordechai. But now for the first time, though I'm willfully going to Achashverosh, that actually you're sending me to Achashverosh, you, Mordechai. So now I will become forbidden to you. So this is the inner drama of Megillat Esther. So once more, these two figures who take claim to Esther HaMelkah are actually the two sides of Adam. What about Eve herself? So it's clear who is the good side of Eve. The good side of Eve is Esther herself. Who is the bad side of Eve? The other queen, the first queen of Achashverosh, who he actually killed, Vashti HaMelkah. What about the serpent, the Nachash, the primordial snake? So he also split into two. But both of them are bad, and they're a couple. The two first splits, the man split into two men, and the woman split into two women. But the snake split into a couple. The couple is Haman and Zeresh. Haman and his wife, his evil wife, Zeresh. At a certain point, as we'll explain, the two sides of Adam also become a couple. They become Mordechai and Esther. And the two sides of Eve by herself also become a couple. That's Achashverosh and Vashti. When does this change happen? First, and once more, the man split into two men and the woman split into two women. But the snake split into a man and a woman. That becomes evident when it becomes clear that all three figures, there's a figure above all three, which is an even more primordial Eve. Hakol min ha'isha. one of the yet unsolved problems in biology and evolutionary biology is, why does nature need men in the first place? Whoever knows a drop of biology knows that it's possible in nature that procreation can happen just from mothers, from women. In order to continue the species, there's no need in nature for males. So this is one of the riddles, maybe the greatest riddle of nature. Why did those that believe in nature, why did nature choose to have two different sexes that have to unite in order to procreate? Women are enough. Em kochai, mothers are enough. Mothers bear daughters, and the daughters bear more daughters, and the species continues forever and forever. Adam and Eve and the snake are actually the brain and the heart and the liver of the yet primordial Eve above all, the Em Kochai. When that becomes apparent, then the Adam, who is actually Eve, is just her brain, splits into the pair of Mordechai and Esther. And the heart, the emotion, in and of itself, splits into the pair of Achashverosh and Vashti. And once more, the snake initially splits into a pair, the couple, which is Haman and Zeresh. When we speak of different personalities, that everybody has at least two sides to him, if not more. So in modern psychology, there are actually three different disorders. Once more, everybody has all of these. It's just a question of how extreme the poles are. One disorder is called bipolar, manic depression. The second is called schizophrenia. The third is called dissociative identity disorder. And the psychiatrists and psychologists are very, very stress the need to distinguish and differentiate between these disorders, not to confuse these three different things. For just a regular layperson, all three have a common denominator, that there are drastic, extreme personality changes. So it means as though, once more, they're all three different examples of maybe I'm not just one person, maybe I'm two people, at least. What is the difference? Once more, the psychologists don't try to tell you the common denominator. They just try to tell you the difference. Don't mix them up. Bipolar disorder is simply that, not that you're two different people. You're one guy with extreme moods. You're extremely moody. That sometimes you're very, very high, and sometimes you're very, very low. But it's not as though you have two different identities. But still, it's two moods. Right? We always used to explain, we always explain that take a simple physical phenomenon like temperature, heat and cold. So according to Aristotle and all of the early pre-modern scientists, so the two states are two different states. And modern science comes and says, no, it's all one state. It's one thing, it's one phenomenon. It's called temperature. It's either high or low. But not that heat is something by itself and cold is something else. Like the opposite, that cold is anti-heat. Like a particle and an antiparticle. No, it's just one continuum. One coordinate of temperature. So the same thing the psychologists will tell you about manic and depression. It's not two different things, not two different people. It's one person. It's just that he's either hot or cold. He's just high or low. The second thing is called schizophrenia. What does that mean? So this is the one that's usually misinterpreted by lay people to think that it means split personality, but once more the psychologist will say, no, it does not mean split personality. It's not a dissociative identity disorder or a multiple personality disorder. It's something else altogether. It means that there's once more there's one person, just that he either has hallucinations or delusions, or to make it simple, he's either in reality or out of reality. He's in communication with reality, or he temporarily loses communication with reality. So again, observing this person from the outside, you can think it's two different people, because one day he's with you, and the next day he's not with you. He's someplace else. So for you, it's two different guys. But once more, the psychologist will tell you, the psychiatrist will tell you, it's just one person, he's just schizophrenic. It's not a dissociative identity disorder. Whereas the third case is what we're really talking about. And in order to understand it better, that's why we brought up these other two disorders, which is the DID, that he really at times is Dr. Jekyll, and at other times he turns into Mr. Hyde. Two different people in the same body. But what did Esther do? She was able to so dissociate that she also was able to enclose each half in a body of its own. Both bodies resembled one another completely. But each half had its body. This topic is related to what's called possession. A person becomes possessed by a D-book. Everybody has heard of D-book. Once more in English, the word is to become possessed. So that sounds really, really bad. You need some great Mekuba to come and take out the D-book, to extract the D-book. But once more, everybody has a D-book, because your Yetzer Hara is also a D-book. Now, sometimes to be possessed is not even a bad thing at all. Let's say a person is so connected to a tzaddik, like a chosi to a Rebbe, that he's possessed by his Rebbe. Let's talk about the Lubavitcher Rebbe. He was also possessed. He was possessed by Messiah, by the Mashiach. He was so possessed by the Mashiach that he was about to become the Mashiach. Because the Mashiach took over his personality. This can be the greatest thing. Maybe this is what we're waiting for Mashiach to come. For Mashiach to actually possess somebody totally. And then he'll become the Mashiach forever and ever. What we now just said is that the dark side of one's personality has infinite potential to it to become even greater light, infinite light, even more than the initial light side of the personality. It just has to be transformed. It's called ki yitron ha'or min ha'choshen, the advantage of light, when the darkness itself transforms into light. As we said before, let's go back to the three dual, we'll call it now dual disorders, because each one is a different state of duality. And we said that now duality, all duality, even our DID, which appears to be two different people, is also in some respect is one coordinate. So these three different disorders can be considered to be three coordinates, like in three-dimensional space. The bipolar disorder can be envisioned as the coordinate of up and down. You're either high or you're low. The schizophrenic disorder, which means you're either in it or out of it, can be considered to be the front-back coordinate. I'm either envisioning reality or I'm just in the back, which is not in contact with reality, in contact with hallucination. The DID, dissociative identity disorder, is a right-left syndrome. That's why the way that we portray the light side and the dark side of the personality is two profiles. So actually, the suggested mask, the ideal mask for Purim is a mask which is half light and half dark. Because that mask is not just your dark side, it's portraying the fact that you have two sides. And the two sides are my right and my left. And once more, the left also has tremendous potential to it. Just for the time being, it's dark. So from this simple analysis, that actually these three different disorders or three different syndromes that can be seen to correspond to three different coordinates of three-dimensional space. This may also suggest possible remedies. What to do if a person has a problem? Once more, an exaggerated state, one of these three states. To come back to relative stability and equilibrium. One of our most basic teachings is that the Torah gives us 6 continual commandments to have in mind. It means to contemplate continuously, 24 hours a day. And actually there are 3 pairs which correspond to the 3 coordinates of reality. This is a book that maybe is right here called Living in Divine Space. How to put yourself into an orientation, a psychological state of orientation that I'm always contemplating, always aware. It's a state of awareness, of consciousness. I'm aware of God above and God below, which actually correspond to the first 2 commandments of the 10 commandments, each of which is a continual commandment. The first commandment, I am God who has taken you out of Egypt, is up and have no other gods besides me. That is down. the front back, 2 commandments. The front is Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, Hear, O Israel, God is our God, God is one. The unity of God. The back is not to allow foreign thoughts to enter your mind. So now we can understand even a little bit more what foreign thoughts means. Foreign thoughts means thoughts which are non-real. Every foreign thought that a person has is a type of hallucination or delusion. And if you have too many foreign thoughts, so you really enter into a state, a psychological state of hallucination. But what's now the essential, we call the right-left syndrome, the pair of the continual commandments that corresponds to right and left, is love and fear. Love of God and fear of God. Love of God includes within itself also the love of other souls, love of Israel, love your neighbor as yourself. It's actually considered to be the epitome of loving God, that you love who God loves. So what does this once more suggest? That the actual 2 personalities is, the remedy is to work on love and fear. Especially your Mr. Hyde side, you have to work on fear, on awe of God. The bipolar coordinate, which is up and down, is the re-experience of the giving of the Torah at Sinai. And hearing these 2 first commandments, we heard directly from God. That contemplation, which is also one of the things that we are commanded to remember every day, the giving of the Torah, that contemplation, hearing those two first commandments of the 10 commandments, that's a stabilizing factor vis-a-vis bipolar. Contemplating God's absolute unity and trying to control one's thoughts. That I am in control of my thoughts. That's overcoming schizophrenia. Right, so there's much more that we can talk about this, but let's leave it at that. We already have now so to speak, defined or come up with a very, very beautiful way to understand these 3 dualities in personality. Let's go back to the essential point that we're trying to make, which is that the basis of split personality relates actually to Chava, to Eve, to the first woman. We mentioned a term which is a book that every English-speaking person and maybe also non-English-speaking know about. That's The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, written by Robert Louis Stevenson at the end of the 19th century. It immediately became a tremendous bestseller around the world. That strange case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde was based on an experience that he himself had, that his best friend was a doctor that was convicted to be a murderer, murdered his wife. He poisoned his wife. Afterwards, it was revealed that he poisoned many patients. So he was so overtaken by this experience that he had this good friend who appeared to be a good guy. And he was a hideous character underground. So that's what inspired him to write this book. The book actually is fiction, but it was inspired, it was traumatically inspired by an experience that he had with a friend of his. Who remembers, let's see if somebody knows who is White Eve and Black Eve? There we go. Who's right? Okay, that's it. In the 50s, in the 1950s, two psychiatrists had a case study of a woman. This is already a real story. It's not a fiction based upon experience. It's a real story, and it became a best-selling book and film in Hollywood. Immediately it was sold, the book, to Hollywood. There's two psychiatrists who dealt with the case, with the live case. They helped write the script of the film. It's called Three Faces of Eve. What 20 years later, the real woman revealed her identity. And afterwards, she lived also for several decades after that, and she wrote books. She was already stable. She has children who are alive. The real Eve. So all of these, the story, whoever doesn't remember the story, so there was a called a timid housewife who suddenly turned into a overexcited play woman, which resulted in her almost killing her daughter and resulted in divorce from her husband. But then, under psychiatric treatment by these two psychiatrists that gave her therapy, a third, or sometimes she was Eve White, sometimes she was Eve Black. That's what they called her. But we call it light and dark. They call it almost the same thing, white and black. This is an example of a story with a happy ending. The happy ending was a true story. The happy ending is that after years of therapy, a third Eve emerged. Our third person, a higher person. Meaning that these two original persons were the two sides of the lower Eve. And therapy helped that a third Eve, she renamed herself to be called, in the film it's called Jane, she became Jane. But Jane is Eve number 3. And she was a normal person. And the more that this third Eve became strong and present, the two other Eves, the white Eve and the black Eve, disappeared. And what remained was only Jane, Eve number 3. This is the third. There's already 3 people. Dr. Jekyll Messiah is 2. Three-phase Aviv is three. And once more, three-phase Aviv is a progression. It's 70 years after Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Is there something about 70 years before Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde which actually the beginning of the whole process? There is a book which became the most famous book of that period, written by a guru from London who then went to France. It's called Frankenstein. A guru, 18 years old, had a dream to compose a horror story. Very talented guru, obviously. Aristocratic guru. And it took her some time, but she accomplished what she wanted. And when we hear about it, it sounds to us something similar to the Golem of Prague, to the Maharal's Golem. And in our literature, there are other examples of Golems. Even in the Talmud, the sages were able to create Golems. One of the great rabbis after the Maharal of Prague, the Chacham Shvi, said that his grandfather created a golem, and that he even addresses a deep halachic question whether that golem can be counted as one of the 10 for a quorum of a minyan of Jews to pray. The final, at the end, he paskins no, but it's an involved halachic question regarding a golem. I mean, that it's a real thing. But her golem, Frankenstein, was just a chemist who created a monster. At the end, the monster killed him. What Kabbalistic model can we use for these? But this is in modern non-Jewish literary history. 3 stages, 1, 2, 3. A person creates a monster. The monster must have come from his black side. But the monster takes him over altogether. But it's just one. Then already this is already much more involved. Evolved evolution, evolved state, that it's one person that goes back and forth. Back and forth from Dr. Jekyll to Mr. Hyde. Then the final stage is already 3. At the beginning there's this duality, a little bit similar to Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. But then the true source of the true good soul manifests at a certain point, and the 2 lower souls disappear. The best Kabbalistic model for these 3 stages is called Ibur Yenikamochin, is the terminology in Kabbalah. It's the state of mind whilst in pregnancy, as a fetus. The state of mind whilst nursing, which is in youth, and the state of mind whilst maturity. Right. Beginning from the highest level, in maturity, there is the possibility to reveal the 3rd higher level of the soul. In immaturity, there's only the back and forth, the pendulum between Jekyll and Hyde. in pregnancy, there's only the imagination once more. The first story is total imagination of this girl, Shelley. Where does imagination take place? In the womb. The imagination is to create this monster. A higher psychological level, once more, is the split personality of Jekyll and Hyde. But the ultimate is to be able to overcome, not necessarily through psychotherapy, but through what we call Hasidic psychotherapy, which is learning Tanya and being able to reveal the higher soul until the effects, definitely the negative effects and the pendulum back and forth of the lower soul just disappear into the experience of the higher soul. Exactly as explained in Tanya, that in the beginning the person is not identified, I'm talking now about identity disorder, is not identified with his higher soul at all, he's just identified with his lower soul. And that's where the split takes place, occurs. When he becomes truly identified with the higher soul, then the split disappears, becomes perfectly stable. I'll go back to the essence. Why do we say that the real split has to do with Eve more than Adam and the snake? And all of the splits come from this primordial Eve figure. Because we're taught in Kabbalah that there are actually two Eves from the very outset of creation. There is Eve 1 and Eve 2. Which is exactly like our three-faced of Eve, black Eve and white Eve, exactly. It's what's explained in the Zohar. And it doesn't say anything similar to Adam and the snake. There's just one snake. He's bad, a bad guy. There's just one Adam. He's okay, just that his wife seduces him to eat from the forbidden fruit. So he sins. There's just one of him. But from the very outset, there are two Eves. And the first Eve is black. She becomes a demon figure, whose name is Lamed Yud Tav. She has a name to her. A derivative either of wounding or of night, which relate to one another. It means a dark figure, a dark Eve. And then there's the light Eve, the good Eve, the second Eve. How do they return? In the time of Adam, there was once more the black Eve and the white Eve. But in a later generation, the time of Jacob, they returned as his two righteous wives. Because Leah, whose name also is like this name of the demon Eve, she cried so hard not to fall into the fortune of wicked Esau, which was her goral, her fortune, that she transformed her darkness into great light, and Moses comes from her, the Mashiach comes from her. Even though Yaakov fell in love with Rachel, who is initially the white Eve, because she was beautiful, and Joseph comes from her. But all of the enduring, eternal, great figures, as we said, Moses and King David and the Messiah, they all come from Leah, because this is the greatest example of potential energy being in the dark. Her whole union with Jacob was a dark union, because he didn't know, he thought it was Rachel. was all in the dark. Because she represents the dark. He did not understand her, but all of the potential was in her, forever and ever. What is the final story of the bad in Purim? That the bad side of Eve, means the black Eve, becomes who? Becomes Vashti. And the white Eve becomes Esther. Let's go back for a second. Esther is the good side of Eve. But then Esther herself splits into two sides. But split personality takes place in several stages, stage after stage. This is the greatest example. That first there's Eve. Now Eve herself is two. So we could say that the bad side, which becomes Vashti, is coming from black Eve. And the good side, which is Esther, is coming from white Eve. Or we can say that actually it's a split in the good Eve herself. But she also has two sides. That the good becomes Esther, and the dark, the relative dark, becomes Vashti. And the simple explanation is the first explanation. But from the second stage of split and the third stage of split, we see that each side also has two sides to it. Because the second split, that the Esther was the good side of Eve, now splits into two, into her light side and her bad side, and her demon side, and her shady side. And her shady side, she sends to Achashverosh, and they have a child. But that shady side itself has two sides to it. That's why the child, the common child, who's Daryavish, the king, has his relatively dark side, that he's a goy, he's not defined as a Jew, but he has his good side, that he built the temple. So he's responsible for the building of the temple. So a very, very good side. So we see that the split continues, that the bad splits into good and bad, and the good splits into good and bad. It's called two different types of beirur. In halakha, clarification, which means splitting things into its good and bad, takes place within the good and within the bad, each by itself. That the good has a good and bad to it, and the bad also has a good and bad to it. And with the greatest example is here in the case of Esther. Now, let's ask the question, what happens to what becomes ultimately the middle, which combines the two couples, is Achashverosh and Vashti. That on one side of these two, there is Mordechai and Esther, and on the other side of these two, there is Haman and Zeresh. Now this is maybe the most amazing gematria of the whole Megillat Esther. If I calculate that middle couple, which is Achashverosh and Vashti, the number that I get is 1,537. But if I take the two pairs that are on the two sides, that one pair is Mordechai and Esther, we'll say on the right side, and the other pair is Haman and Zeresh on the left side, their numerical value is exactly equal, exactly the same. Once more, Achashverosh Vashti is 1,537. Mordechai Esther, Haman Zeresh is also 1,537. The middle phenomenon, in a certain way, contains the two extreme, the extreme good and the extreme bad, all in the middle. So the final question that the Arizal asks is, how are we going to be metakin? Or when did it, at any point in history, was there a tikkun, a rectification of King Achashverosh and Vashti? How do I know that Vashti was such a bad figure in her incarnation as Queen Vashti? Because one of the things that she did, she forced Jewish girls to desecrate the day of Shabbat. The Arizal says an amazing thing. There's a midrash, a story that the sages recall, that once there was a Jew called, the term in the midrash is Yisrael Echad. There was one Jewish soul, Yisrael Echad, one Israelite, that he had a cow, a para. Para was like Purim, the same two-letter root. He had a cow. And he became so poor. Poor is also Purim. He became so poor that he had to sell his cow. And he had no Jewish client to buy his cow. So he finally sold his cow to a goy. Came Shabbos, the day of Shabbos, the cow just put herself down to the ground and was not willing to move because it's Shabbos. A Jew cannot work with his cow on Shabbos. The cow has to rest, just like the Jew has to rest. It's a commandment in the Torah. The goy started beating the cow. All week long you were plowing my field. You were doing a good job. All of a sudden comes a day that you're just lying down and you're not moving at all. So no matter how hard he hit his cow, the cow did not move. So he called this Jew, the Yisrael Echad, who sold him the cow, and he said that you have to give my money back and take back your cow because the cow is not functioning. The cow is either bipolar or something else. Has some problem. One of our three problems, this cow definitely has, because he's not acting normally at all. So the Jew, the Yisrael Echad, he immediately realized that this is not that the reason that the cow is not willing to work on Shabbos is because it's Shabbos. The cow must be a great tzaddik that he knows that he has to rest on Shabbos. So what did the Jew do? He went to the cow and he whispered into the ear of the cow and he said, "Cow, cow, para, para. You should know that so long as you are my pal, my cow, so you had to rest on Shabbat. It's a mitzvah in the Torah that you rest, just like I rest. You have to rest also. But now, unfortunately, I had to sell you, and I had to sell you to a goy, to a non-Jew. And now you no longer have this mitzvah to rest, so you have to get up and work. This is your fate. It's a sorrow fate, but this is your fate. It's nothing we can do about it." So that's what he whispered into the ear of the cow. So when the cow heard that, reluctantly, the cow got up and was willing to accept to begin to plow the field. When the goy saw the non-Jew saw this amazing thing happen, so his first thought was, Kisha must be some black magic here, that the Jew is a magician. So he went over to the Jew. He says, "Well, what did you do? What did you do to the cow?" I hit the cow 1,000,000 times. It didn't help at all. So the Jew just told him the truth. He said, "I'm a Jew, and we rest on Shabbat, and our cows also have to rest on Shabbat. The cow was used to resting on Shabbat, so he's not willing to work on Shabbat." So I whispered into his ear, "Cow, cow. You used to be my cow, but now you belong to somebody else." When the goy heard this story and saw that, he said to himself, he thought to himself, that this cow that doesn't speak and doesn't have a human consciousness, that's the term that's used. He doesn't speak and doesn't have human consciousness. He keeps the will of his creator. I, this is a non-Jew, I that speak and have human consciousness should not keep the will of my creator. Then it says, miyad is the term in Hebrew, miyad ba v'nitkayer. He immediately came and converted to Judaism, and he began to learn. He studied Torah, and he became a great sage. And his name was Rabbi Yochanan ben Torta. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Torta means that he's Rabbi Yochanan, the son of the cow. So actually, the cow was his father or mother, or both together, because the cow is who was responsible, who gave him his spiritual birth as a Jew. The Arizal says that this is also a repeat of the story that we read yesterday in the Haftarah, that Eliyahu Navi brought 2 cows on Mount Carmel, one that the priests of the idolatry should try to sacrifice, that fire should descend from heaven, and one that he will sacrifice. The cow that was given to the Nevi Abba was not willing to. There were 900 prophets of idolatry. All together, they could not budge the cow. He wouldn't move because he didn't want to be sacrificed to idolatry. So Eliyahu Hanavi had to come, the prophet Elijah had to come and whisper also into his, and he said, cow, you should know that just like the cow that I'm going to sacrifice to God, through him God's name will be sanctified. Through you also God's name will be sanctified. That the prophets of the idolatry will not be successful in having fire descend from heaven. So when the cow heard that you also will sanctify God's name by as though being sacrificed to idolatry, the cow agreed. So there's another replay. Who was that cow and the Ger Tzedek, whose name is Rabbi Yochanan ben Torta? So the Ari says that that's Vashti and Achashverosh. That Vashti, who forced the Jewish girls to work on Shabbos, she reincarnated as this righteous cow, Purim figure, that was not willing to work on Shabbos. And because of her, this Goy, who saw this miracle happen, he converted, and he was actually Achashverosh himself. So we see that everyone has the good and the bad, the 2 sides. And one part of the teaching is that in the dark side, there is great, great potential. And this whole thing with the books the Goyish books that we mentioned before, is to show that even in modern psychology, there's tremendous progress of mind, of consciousness. From imagination in the womb to immature personality split to more mature personality split, which results ultimately in revealing your true higher person. So this is the teaching of today, which is the continuation of Purim.
Just in case anyone was not Yotzi the mitzvah Ad Lo Yadan Purim, you can be Yotzi on this class. Okay, before we have questions, we're going to repeat a few announcements. First of all, this class is dedicated to Ilui Neshama of Esther Bat Yosef and Alta Necha Bat Chaim Nata. The next class, as we announced at the beginning, will not be the first Sunday of April. It will be the second Sunday of April because of Pesach. So it will be the Sunday immediately following Pesach, April 8th, the 23rd of Nisan, or the Chaf Daled. And then in May, we will return to the first Sunday of the Gregorian calendar. The book of the month, again, is this book on Pesach, Sodot mean Seder?
Haggadah. Haggadah it is.
Yes, it's the Haggadah of Pesach, and as we said before, it is highly, highly recommended. It's available here for 60 shekel, and people from around the world, you have plenty of time to order it, but do it quickly so it gets to you in time. It's on the website. I'm going to take my prerogative to ask a few questions. So the first question is something that I don't feel I've ever gotten an answer that satisfied me. Everyone knows this idea of when Esther says, Avadati, Avadati, she's saying, as you said, now that I'm going to Achashverosh from my own will, now I'll be forbidden to you. The truth is I've never understood this because she's still not going from her own will. She's going, first of all, to save the Jewish people. She's going to talk to Achashverosh. And even so, her overall context is still not of free will whatsoever. But added to what you described tonight, according to the Ari, of the shadow side of Esther, who was going to Achashverosh the whole time, and the other side was going to Mordechai the whole time, how did she become forbidden to him?
Okay, so this question actually, one of the Mekubalim asked exactly the same question. The last part of the question, that on the one hand, it's she sent just to her shadow side. So why is she forbidden? The fact that according to Halakha she is forbidden is because she did, in order to save the Jewish people, she went voluntarily. She was not caught. No, she didn't just talk. She talked to him, but behind talking to him, if you go to a party to drink, there's a continuation to that. She didn't just talk with him. So, and she did it. She initiated it. Up until now, she was not the initiator. Only when he called her to come did she come. But now, for the first time, she initiated it herself. That's the simple pshat. But the question is, what you asked at the end, is that according to Kabbalah, she's just sending her shadow side. So why should she be? Why should be forbidden to Mordechai? That Mordechai is her good side. As to this association is total in her case. And the source that asked the question has no answer. So even if you have no answer, you're in good partnership. But the possible answer that we can say is that that in truth, when she went back to Mordechai after sending her shadow side to Achashverosh, so she obviously reunited, meaning that together with Mordechai, she was the whole Esther. Because as we said, in the shadow side, there is also potential and good, and that good will be revealed in generations to come. As soon as her shadow side becomes forbidden, is also in halakha, means that her shadow side becomes, her nefesh habahamit becomes forbidden to Mordechai. That's not good. A true union between man and woman has to include both sides, especially in the case of the woman. So if she can not only be unified with Mordechai, her good, 100% good side, it could be that there's no potency in that. The true potency is when she is a united Esther. So let's leave it at that.
Okay, second question is, you mentioned about dibuk. And then you mentioned that possession could be a good thing, but I'm sure I'm not the only person who thought of this. Can you explain more the relationship between what's called ibor and dibuk?
Okay, so I also thought to explain. The ibor is usually used in the case when a person merits that some great tzaddik enters into his psyche in order to help him do a mitzvah which also is a rectification for that tzaddik that he did not merit in his lifetime to perform that mitzvah completely. And now he enters into someone else to help me perform that mitzvah completely. So it's good for me and it's good for him. That's the usual interpretation in Kabbalah of ibur, means that it's a good phenomenon. A dibuk is usually in the sense that there is a soul that is in kappa kela. Kappa kela, what's the English kappa kela? No, but the English word...
Suspended and...
No, there's a word for it.
Limbo.
Limbo.
Suspended.
There's another one. A soul that has left the body and has not yet found rest, either in heaven or in the opposite.
Purgatory.
Purgatory, that's it. Purgatory. It's purgatory. In the state of purgatory. And now he enters into a body as a rescue, just in order to rest someplace, and the influence that he has on that body is usually very, very negative. That's the usual usage of the word term dibuk, and that's why he has to be exorted from the body. And usually some tzaddik has to do it. But as we said before, to abstract these concepts, the dibuk can just be your own Yetzer Hara. And the ibor, if it's a good ibor, it can be your Yetzer Tov that comes to you, or is reinforced. But that's the usual difference between the terms ibor and dibuk.
Okay, here's a question from Angela from Rock Island, Washington. And she's asking if your explanation of split personalities or any of the three disorders that we talked about, could this be somehow an answer to Yaakov and Esav inside the womb? The inside personality that is actually split in two.
Okay, so definitely the whole concept of split personality, and that a person has a good side and a bad side, has to do with these twins, that everyone has his Yaakov and his Esav. The initial twins of Yaakov and Esav are Cain and Abel, the two first sons of Adam and Eve. So we talked about Adam and Eve in the sake we didn't talk about Cain and Abel. We did have in mind to mention Cain and Abel in reference to these three books that we mentioned. The first book, the Frankenstein book, is creating Cain, like giving birth to Cain. When Eve initially gives birth to Cain. Cain by himself. Then the second stage, the Jekyll-Hyde stage, which is it's called nursing, an infant or an infantile or a minor psychological state of being, is when you have these two brothers, Cain and Abel, and they fight with one another, and what happens is that Cain kills Abel. So actually Esau wanted to kill Yaakov also, he just wasn't successful. But the one that was successful in killing his brother was the original case of two anti-brothers, which is Cain and Abel. The third personality that appears is after 130 years went by. And during that time, it says Adam remarried his first dark Eve. But Eve Black was initially created. Then came Eve 2, and at the very beginning of creation. After the sin, or actually during this primordial sin, Eve Black inside Eve White was responsible for the sin. Then after the sin for 130 years, he just had Eve Black. But then Eve White also at her third came back at the higher level, and she gave birth to the third son, Shet, who became the foundation of the world. So this whole development process of 1, 2, 3 is actually the greatest, the exact model in the Torah is Cain by himself. Because Cain by himself is Frankenstein. Then Cain and Abel, who is Jekyll and Hyde. And Hyde kills Jekyll at the end. That's what happens. And then finally there is a third person that is born, a third son that is born, Shet. And he reincarnates, as it were, like resurrects, as it were, evil. But the other two disappear, exactly as like in the story, the three faces of Aviv. The other two disappear from history. And the one that remains in history is only the third, Shet. He's the origin of the soul of Moses. So this is this fraternal relationship.
Okay, Ilan from Melbourne, Australia. Even though you didn't mention, these words are very connected to what you were teaching. So he's asking, can we access super consciousness consciously? If yes, how can we not lose it?
Super consciousness is considered to be the crown, and the crown has actually three levels to it, which we call faith, pleasure, and will. So through our service of Hashem, through meditation, definitely these three levels can become conscious. It's called to bring down the surrounding lights, the makifim or makif, into the inner conscious lights. Obviously, there is the etzedu matzah. There's the counterpart, which is like the in Freudian psychology is called the black abyss of the unconscious, of the subconscious. So even he, through psychoanalysis, tried to bring out the black subconscious. Since we have a principle which is meruba midah tova, that the good is always better is always more and stronger than the evil. So if Freud can bring out the black subconscious, so definitely we, through our spiritual service, can also bring down the positive superconscious, bring into our consciousness.
Okay, Anne Ita from Vancouver, British Columbia. In context with the different psychological terms that you were explaining, she's asking, where does a psychopathic personality fit into this, and how is it identified?
So it can be a extreme form of schizophrenia. That you lose, once more, schizophrenia is defined as losing touch with reality. So you become psychopathic.
Okay, Dariush from Los Angeles, California. Oh, people know her, I guess. No? Yes? I don't know, there's not a V here. It says, maybe it's Darvayut. This is what it's, I think it says Daryush, Daryavish, whatever. Another Gilgul. She's asking, how can one be exorcised or unpossessed if he or she is possessed by a dark spirit and knows it?
Okay, so the best thing is to connect to a tzaddik. That either consciously the tzaddik will take out the bad spirit, or just by being connected, become possessed by a tzaddik. Then your other possession will disappear, will vanish.
Okay, since we're talking about this, because there are certain authorities that say that despite the fact that it's talked about in the Midrash and the Gemara, who say that these kind of spirits and dibukum do not exist now. What would you say about that?
I would say that they exist, and it says that even the Lamed Vav Tzaddikim, we know that in every generation there are 36 Tzaddikim that receive the presence, that experience the presence of the divine Shekhinah every day. So it says that over history, in every generation, they appear in totally different form. That's the same type of hidden tzaddikim that were in the time of the Baal Shem Tov, as described in all of the stories of the Baal Shem Tov. Now they can be just simple people. The same is true about everything. That a dibuk, as we said before, cannot just... Nowadays, a dibuk is some mental or psychological disorder. Period.
Another question that I thought of during the shiur, and please correct me if I do not remember correctly, but I remember once, at least I think, you're teaching that the split that happened with the Nachash, that the good side of the Nachash is Charvona.
It could be that you remember better than me. So Charvona was one of the advisors to, he is mentioned twice in the Megillah. First he's mentioned as one of the advisors of King Achashverosh. And as one of the advisors, he's the one that says that Haman constructed this tree 50 cubits high, and now he appears to be going against the king, so he was actually responsible for having Haman hung on the tree. So we say that at that moment he also became possessed. Who did he become possessed by? By Eliyahu Navi. Because of both of them we say the same terminology. Eliyahu Navi Zachor Tov. The prophet Elijah we spoke about before, that we read in the Haftarah yesterday. The prophet Elijah may be remembered for good. The same terminology is used in reference to Charvona. V'gam Charvona Zachor Tov. So he was definitely possessed by a good figure. Whether he is the good side of the Nachash, could be.
I thought I remembered this.
It could be.
Okay, Avram from Los Angeles. Who exactly is Lilith, and how did she come to exist? And what is her ultimate purpose? I thought that Lilith was the wife of the Samach Mem. Am I mistaken?
Right, so before, she is considered to be she is the first Chava Rishonah, that's the term in Kabbalah, and part of her says return to the dust. Part of her was divorced from Adam. She also has her potential, or positive potential, and that became Leah, the matriarch, who was the mother of the Messiah, and other very, very great figures in the continuation. So once more, the whole point of this evening was that even the bad has good. The good also has bad. And there's a rectification process in splitting. And splitting can also be a good phenomenon. It can be a not such a good phenomenon. It can be a disease, an illness, split personality. Because it be a part of a rectification process. And even the worst also has its good side.
I just want to go over this because I think he's also asking, just like maybe pshat of the Masorah. So we say Chava came, there's a story in the Torah, from the side of Adam. So he's asking, well, where did Lilith come from?
Okay. So when Chava was created, it first says that God took one of the limbs. Actually, it's one of the sides. The word tzela, which is usually interpreted translated in English as rib, means side. He took a side. It's usually considered to be the backside, which is the relative unconscious side of Adam, and he, by his kol basar tachtena, said that he took this side, which afterwards becomes a bone, we'll see, and then he dresses this bone, this side, with flesh, and that bone dressed with flesh becomes Chava. So the Arizal, based upon the Zohar, says that the initial side, which is bone, which is skeleton, without flesh, that is the initial Chava, whose name is Lamed Yud Lamed, this name that was just mentioned. The flesh is the second Chava. That's why we said that very often the first Chava is actually inside. It's actually the skeleton of the second Chava. How do I know that there are two, that the skeleton, that the bone and the flesh are two different people? Right, this is already a new thing. We didn't go into this. This is a very important thing, that the original two Chavas are the bone and the flesh. Because afterwards, Adam says, "So tapam." This now, when Chava was born, Hashem, when God brought Eve to Adam, he said that now, this time, she is the bone from my bones and the flesh from my flesh. Etzem yatzamai ubasar mibsari. So the Kabbalah says that the bone from my bones, that is the first Chava, and the flesh from my flesh, that's the second Chava. But the simple, literal interpretation is of one person. Just everybody has a skeleton, has flesh. We're now saying that that Chava, the initial two Chavas are the difference between skeleton and flesh. If you just have a skeleton by itself, it's relatively like a monster. It's not a beautiful thing. But if you have already flesh, it becomes a beautiful. Just like a difference between Leah and Rachel. But there's something more essential about bones. The word bone means essence, atzmut in Hebrew. So if we already have the demon figure being the bone, that shoots up this demon figure to a very, very high and essential place. And the most important thing is that it places the demon inside the flesh. That the flesh encloses the... What happens when I add those two words together, etzem and basar, the bone and the flesh? This time, you are the bone of my bones and the flesh of my flesh. This is also a very beautiful gematria that the Arizal explains. That etzem is 200, basar is 502. Together it's 702, and Shabbat. Shabbat is the day of the woman. Shabbat is before, but the 6 days of the week are the man. Shabbat is the one, because there was Shabbat also before creation. That's the Eve who was before Adam. The Shabbat before creation is the Eve before Adam. And she has two sides to her, bone and flesh.
Adelo Yada. First, I just want to, usually we take a lot of questions from here, if we have time, but a lot of times we only have 2 or 3 questions from Chutz La'aretz. And then, so we depend on questions here, but this time we just have a lot of questions, so you'll pardon me if we don't get to everyone, which is impossible. So we'll ask one more, and then we'll take maybe 1 or 2 and 1 or 2, and then we'll call it an evening. This last one, because I think a lot of people were probably wanting to know more about this. Zahava from Borough Park. He said the Rebbe was possessed with Mashiach. And you said one who is possessed with Mashiach can be the potential Mashiach. In another shiur, you stated a convert and another non-related person can join to the Mashiach. Please clarify more.
I don't understand.
I think what she's asking here, you said the Rebbe was possessed by the Mashiach.
Yes.
She remembers, rightfully or wrongfully, that you said in another shiur, I guess that the soul of Mashiach would come from a convert, and she just wanted clarification.
Okay, so if we said that, we meant that King David, or Mashiach say, descendant of King David, he came from Ruth, the convert. So Mashiach definitely comes from a convert. Okay, so we have to go back to that class. Being reminded that we said that Mashiach has 3.
That's probably what she's referring to.
That's probably what she's referring to. 3 images, and the first image is the ger. So that the ger image comes from the fact that from the fact that David is the descendant of a ger. So that's the ger figure.
What is the spiritual meaning that Haman, the man, which means spiritual nourishment, right? Why does he have a name like that, Haman, the man?
Okay, so the question is, what is the meaning of the name Haman, which is very connected to the manna, the man in the desert, Ha-man. What spiritual level did he have that he merited that kind of a name?
Good. First of all, any name in Hebrew has beautiful meaning to it. One of the things that the Rambam explains in Moreh Nevuchim and the Guide to the Perplexed is that the holiness, the sacredness of the holy tongue is that it has no bad words. Everything is beautiful and good. So all names and all words are good. There are no dirty words in Hebrew. That's a very important thing that the Rambam says. The relation to the man is that, first of all, Chazal themselves, the sages asked the question, Haman min haTorah minayin? What is the origin of Haman? Where does his name appear? Where is it alluded to in the Torah? And the answer is Hamin ha'etz, that they read Haman Hamin. Did you eat from the forbidden fruit? Meaning that the sages place actually the origin of Haman in the context of the primordial sin. It has to do with eating. If we take the hay of Haman and put it at the end of his name, then it becomes manna. So actually, when we send Homentashen, which is years of Haman, in Mishloach Manot, we send portions, one to another, to a friend. So the word mana is the singular of manot. Mishloach manot. So actually what we're sending back and forth, there's something about Haman that he's like nowadays there are, in physics there are bosons which are force particles. is a particle that connects two different things. So the potential of Haman is actually this manna, this portion of food, which could be the manna itself in the desert, that connects souls once more by giving portions one to the other, by exchanges. Also in physics, you exchanged particles, force particles.
Yes.
One more.
It's written in the Megillah that Esther didn't reveal her nationality. And it also has an explanation that everyone thought that she belonged to their nation. So I'd like to know how that relates to Esther, whether she had more than one or two or three personalities, that every language that she knew might have brought out another personality in her, and how that relates to what we know today. For example, if we take a person in the Shoah that needed to disguise themselves as a non-Jew, but he was supposed from a Hasidic home, that obviously would create a split in them. And how would that relate to languages, to having to not reveal your personality and keeping it at the same time?
Okay, so the question is, we talked about 1, 2, or 3 personalities, but Esther, we're told, didn't reveal her identity, and everyone thought, in other words, she projected a type of face that everyone thought that she was connected to their people. So the question is kind of like, how does that work? And especially the example was given in the Holocaust, when different people, to escape and save their lives, had to pretend to be someone else, obviously a non-Jew, and had to take on that personality. How much of that personality actually is connected to their real personality?
All right. So first of all, this is like very similar to a question that was presented many years ago that we've had several classes about, which has to do with acting. An actor in a play or a film also has to assume a different personality, and an actor or an actress can do hundreds and thousands of, maybe hundreds, say, films in their lifetime, and each time they're a different person. So this is a very, very important psychological question, the value of the good and the bad in acting. Also, obviously, it has to do with the masquerade of Purim. If we'll go back to our 3 faces of Eve, so the real Eve, when at the end of the story and the end of the film is that the third Jane appeared and the 2 Eves disappeared. That was the happy ending. But the true story is, and she herself tells it, that after her good Jane appeared, so it didn't stop there. She went on having phenomena experience of different personalities, and the psychiatrist that treated her afterwards, the therapy afterwards, actually said that she had over 20 different personalities, this woman, and this is a real woman. But at the end, there still was a good ending. She became stable and settled, and everything was good. But she didn't just leave it at 3. She had over 20 different chains. So definitely a person can have many, a whole spectrum of different shades to his personality. And the more shady, the more shady.
I just want to mention that it's very topical because some consider Daniel Day-Lewis the greatest actor of this generation. He's won 3 Oscars. He's up for another one now. And he just announced his retirement. He just announced his retirement. When they asked him, and people collaborated this, is that he would get so much into the people that he was playing. Each time it got harder and harder for him to separate from it. And he just announced his retirement. He said, like, he couldn't take it anymore. He became almost possessed by the people that he was playing. And that's why he's considered the greatest, because it was real for him. Totally real. Let's take something from this side, yes, and then I think we're going to call it an evening.
What's the main thing to work on to go from a two-side personality to a new? What's the main thing to work on to go from a two-side personality to a third one? It is by finding the good in the dark side.
Someone who that's a.
What's the main thing to work?
Oh, okay. So the question is, since we all have these two sides, what is the essential thing that each person can work on in order to unify their being, so they're not constantly being torn in 2 different directions? What was that?
Okay, so one thing we said, that even if we have actually 6 sides, because we have 3 coordinates and each one has two sides to it, so the total rectification and becoming a one true Torah soul is the 6 continual mitzvot of the Torah. That's maybe the most important practical thing that we said. It will be a little bit too long to discuss in the human body. There's something that we've done in the past, that these 3 coordinates appear in the face, in the mouth, and in the body. So say that a person has a bipolar problem, which is an up-down problem, high and low. So if we would be able to expand upon this topic, one advisable remedy for him is to every morning say a half an hour ride a bicycle, because the motion of the feet in bicycle riding is the same as correcting psychologically the coordinate of up and down. There's something similar in the mouth, there's something similar in the head, but again, each one has its. So just as we said that there are these mitzvot, there are also actually 3 sets of practical, physical things that actually can be tested, or psychologists want to become an exact science. The only way that they can merit to be an exact science is by making surveys and testing. So there are actually 9 different tests, physical tests, that theoretically can come out of this class. Of how to see, for instance, if bicycle riding helps people with bipolar disorder. And there are another 2 things. So,
can we be Yotzi with speed walking?
That's what you said.
Okay, one last one. I have to do this because we've mentioned many times that literally people are watching all over the world right now, and we've taken quite, even tonight we took from all over. But tonight we have from Zambia. So Lambe Tasia from Zambia asks, does it mean a great tzaddik is one who masters the darkness in themselves and turns it to light and create? The truth is I don't 100% understand what he means here, but he says, and creates a pendulum as it was with the 3 days created in darkness. So we're trying to decide if he's talking about the 3 days of darkness in Egypt, or that it wasn't until the 4th day of creation that the sun and the moon. It's not clear to me what he means by creates a pendulum as it was with the 3 days created in darkness. But the question is the tzaddik the one who can take his own darkness and turn it into light?
So that's exactly what it says in the Zohar, that he's able to, he can take his darkness and transform it into light. That's the exact words. That's what we meant, that the dark side has infinite potential to it. And the true tzaddik transforms it into great light. As the verse also reads in Isaiah, that the people that walked in darkness suddenly saw great light. That's one of the verses of the redemption.
Do we have more time here?
That's your calling, Said one more.
One question, and that we'll call it the evening.
I'm very curious to know about why all the characters that deal with the Amalek and the archetype of the evil, like Mordechai, that he is a ish Yehudi, and the others like Shaul, as we saw in the Haftarah of the last week, and even Yeshua bin Nun, they come all from the side of Rachel and
Okay, so the question, I lost my concentration a little.
I'll ask the question.
You got it. Okay.
The question is that all of those that fight Amalek, the sages say, right, you're right.
Yeah.
The sages teach us that Amalek is only turned over to the hands of the children of Rachel. And the reason for that is very simple, as explained in the Arizal, that Joseph is the Messiah, the son of Joseph. There are two messianic figures. And his function is to be victorious over Amalek. So it has to come from Joseph, and also in the case of Mordechai and Esther, it was from his brother, also from Rachel, who is from Binyamin, Mordechai and Esther. But it has to come from that's Mashiach ben Yosef. But afterwards, Mashiach ben David, who comes to bring peace to the whole world and to build the temple and to regather all of the exile and to have all of humanity serve one God together, that's Mashiach ben David, and he comes from the dark side. So actually, this is a very good, potent point, that it's the light side that has to fight the initial darkness of Amalek. But it's the dark side that has to be converted into light in order to convert the whole world into light, that the whole world becomes illuminated. Without destroying them, Amalek has to be destroyed, right?
Good sign.
The Rav mentioned that Aimenu had a successful rectification by Ginsburgh. And I want to confront the case of Esther, that we know about him, that at the beginning Leah was supposed to rectify him, but she refused. And then the occasion was given to Dinah, but her father refused, prevented that. And I want to ask, are we supposed to do the rectification of our dark side by our own selves, or we need a messenger like Esau, because now he's waiting for his rectification in the future to come. So how are we supposed to get into that? Our rectification of the dark side. You're like Esau or like Leah?
Okay, so the question was that Rav mentioned that Leah was, in a sense, destined for Esau, but because she cried so much, she was able to change that destiny. And then there's the teaching that that maybe Dinah should have been given to Esau. She could have fixed him. And so the question in the end is, so how do we go about fixing the Esav in ourself, in the world.
Okay, so in a certain level, the objective Esav outside, the Rebbe said that he's already ready. He's waiting for us to just come and redeem him, which we say is through spreading the light of the Torah to the whole world. That's as far as the objective Esav is concerned. Now is the time to spread the light of the Torah to everyone. And Esav is just waiting and ready to receive the light and to undergo a existential transformation due to the light. The inner Esav, the same thing. We have to, through meditation, through study and learning and meditation, we enlighten that inner Esav, and the tzaddik merits to transform the darkness into light, as we said before.
Okay, thank you for everyone for coming. Thank you, everyone. I would like to end with a very, very quick teaching from the Rav that is very shayach, and we'll end with a bracha. Is it says in the Torah that Hashem spoke to Moshe peh el peh. And the Rav once taught that peh is Purim, the first letter of Purim. El peh, the peh of Pesach. And the word El, to mouth, is 31. And there are 31 days between Purim and Pesach. So right now we're between Purim and Pesach, from Geula to Geula, and we should have the merit that this Pesach, even before, we should see the Geula Shlema.
Amen, amen. Yashar koach.